We are trapped by our own identities. Tell me this. How often do you question why you believe the things that you do? Did you choose to believe the things you believe in? Or were they just something you accepted? When you notice that certain beliefs you have are harmful, what steps do you take to change them? Let's say that you believe that you have to please people, and so you find it hard to say no. Maybe one thing you can practice is by paying close attention to when you feel uncomfortable with something, and then learning to say no. As in, pause before you say yes. Pay attention to your thoughts and emotions, and only then give your answer. And the more that you do it, the more that you learn that it's fine to say no, and you strengthen your own capacity like a muscle. Going back to the main topic of beliefs, a question to ask oneself is, when someone says something that threatens your identity, do you feel a need to defend yourself? A need to prove them wrong? I think it's a good thing to question. To what extent are your actions dictated by trying to uphold this image you have of yourself? Because if everything you do is for the purpose of maintaining your self-image, I think that can be quite dangerous. You fundamentally end up imprisoning yourself. You become a slave to your own identity. When someone becomes a slave to their own identity, they get tunnel vision. They end up doing everything to uphold that identity, even if it means doing things that ultimately make their life worse in the long term. Think about people pleasers who constantly get taken advantage of. The person who absolutely hates their job but whose self-worth is too tied up to expectations of them to find an alternative. The person who focuses too much on career and material accomplishments, only to later regret it because it has destroyed their relationships. I believe that a person needs to have the capacity to escape their own identity. Identity should serve you and not the other way around. What do I mean by this? You may be thinking. Identity should be like a tool. It should be something used to help you adapt to the world, something to help your life feel meaningful and worth living. But instead of treating it like a tool, many people make the mistake of treating it like a god, like something that should be endlessly worshipped, regardless of the cost. As people feel the need to maintain this image they have of themselves. And this is how control and exploitation happens. This is how organizations and charismatic leaders get people to do their bidding even if what they're asking you to do isn't in your best interests. They sell you an identity and the perks that come with it, a way to understand the world, social belonging, the feeling of righteousness. And the more that you buy into it heavily, the more that they can make you do things that you would find normally questionable, morally questionable. And this doesn't just apply to people or organizations that are deliberately trying to exploit. It is possible that they have genuinely good intentions to fix some kind of problem in the world. And people aren't perfect, so naturally, organizations, which are essentially a group of people, wouldn't be perfect either. And even with good intentions, members can be encouraged to do things that are not in their best interests. I would argue that what I'm saying applies to friends and family too. It applies to any dynamic that creates an identity for you. And so the best defense for this, I would say, is the capacity to disengage with your identity so you can never be imprisoned by it. You need to realize that you are not your identity. You are not merely a character in a story. You are someone who is in charge of directing it. You need to be capable of watching your own life like it is something that you're observing from a third-person perspective. And you do that with the knowledge that if the story is not good, then you can change it. You can pursue other things. You are free to change what you are focusing on. You are free to let go of the things that are stopping your development. You are free to let go of the things that cause more suffering than good. You don't have to cling so tightly to things. Why hold on so tightly when it only causes pain? I believe that the path to the liberation of minds begins with self-knowledge. Because self-knowledge is a prerequisite to properly being able to detach from identity. How is this the case? Because when you know yourself well, your strengths, your weaknesses, your limitations, what gives meaning to your life, what things you like, what things you don't like, this can be a good basis from which to evaluate whether an identity is good for you. Let's say you identify as someone hardworking. Over time, you burn out and your life starts to feel miserable. Instead of beating yourself up for not living up to that identity, recognize that your current way of working isn't sustainable. The goal isn't to abandon being hardworking, it's to update what that means. That might mean prioritizing sleep, changing how you work, or cutting low value effort. Even if it conflicts with your self image, remember, the evidence matters more than the identity. Instead of saying, I work hard, shift to thinking, I work effectively and sustainably, and work towards that. Self knowledge can be a good basis from which to form healthy boundaries. Because when you know yourself well, you know what you're comfortable with. You don't just let other people define what is acceptable for you. You understand what works for you and what does not. The path to attaining self knowledge is by trying many different things, observing how you react to them, and taking note of those things. So, just to recap before moving on, the first thing to do is to attain self-knowledge via trying out different things and observing yourself. And then the next thing is, as I've said from the beginning, learning to see identity as a tool to use rather than being your entire worldview. Going back to the topic of beliefs and identity, I just want to clarify that when I say beliefs, what I refer to is the underlying information we use that dictate our actions. So if I believe that using a fork and knife makes it more comfortable for me to eat something, then I'll go use a fork and a knife to do so. Identity, on the other hand, is a belief about beliefs. It is a belief that organizes your other beliefs into a hierarchy. It informs you of what to prioritize or deprioritize. For example, if you identify as a good student, you will prioritize studying over having fun if having fun has a net negative effect on your perception of being a good student. Just as I believe that there is a proper way of relating to identity, being to see it as a tool rather than an all-encompassing reality, I think that there is a proper way of seeing beliefs that will help you to see identity as a tool. It is easier to see identity as a tool when you're able to detach from it, because a tool is something that you can let go of and pick up as needed. And in order to detach from it, it's helpful to be comfortable with chaos, comfortable with not knowing, comfortable with being able to suspend knowing what direction you have to go. And so, you need to learn to see beliefs not as a means of achieving certainty, but as a means of achieving anti-fragility. Anti-fragility means that you become more capable of thriving, even when exposed to failures and disorder. Compare the person who believes that self-worth comes from achieving certain outcomes versus someone who believes that the process of trying and learning from it, regardless of outcome, has inherent value. Or the person who believes that meaning can be derived from pursuing what they know to be good versus someone who constantly craves validation. Even when faced with failure or tragedy, the person who derives meaning from following their conscience, correct themselves, or they try to see alternative paths, they can become wiser when dealing with problems if they genuinely desire the good. Whereas, the person who constantly craves validation is easier to enslave by other people. Their self-worth is easier to shatter because their source of meaning comes from things that can be easily taken away. Essentially, what I am saying is that it is good to have beliefs that make you adaptable, beliefs that don't destroy your self-worth or that drive you to feel that life is meaningless when you don't get the outcomes you want. Moving on, the way we think about identity and beliefs plays a central role in how we treat ourselves and others. When identity is rigid, it creates pressure to meet certain standards, and failure to meet them often leads to self-criticism and rumination. If identity is instead treated as a tool, something flexible rather than something we must constantly live up to, then failure carries less weight. There is less reason to fixate on what we lack or wish were different, because those gaps no longer threaten our sense of self. This same flexibility also affects how we relate to others. When we are less tightly attached to our own identity and beliefs, we feel less compelled to impose them. As a result, we become less defensive and more capable of responding with compassion. When I talk about the mind being liberated, what I fundamentally mean is that a mind or a person is enabled to self-correct. They are able to escape loops and thought patterns that are ultimately causing more harm than good. And another component to this concept is being able to defend oneself from predators, people who are exploitative, people who are manipulative and use your own identity against you, as I described earlier. And when you relate to beliefs and identity in the way I described, wherein you're able to hold them lightly and not fuse your identity with them, your sense of self with them, then you become more capable of liberating yourself from your own worst impulses. Think about it. It's a lot easier to let go of beliefs that are harmful when you don't identify with them. For example, if someone believes that they are a loser and they identify with this, then they train themselves to act like one. It becomes self-fulfilling. The last thing I will say is that I believe that we need to shift how we define success as societies. We need to encourage people to find what makes life meaningful for them. Not everyone has to be rich. Not everyone needs to live according to traditional markers of social status. But people should be encouraged to have self-knowledge and to be able to escape their self-imposed prisons.